Hello and welcome to Cupcake Addiction's exploding cupcake tutorial, where I'm going to be showing you how to make this really gorgeous love heart exploding cupcake, but this is a really versatile design. You can see here I've done it with stars and moons. You can do this with any size, any shape you like. You're only limited by your imagination. The things that you'll need, you're going to need some circle cutters. So the sizes of your circle cutters, the larger one is about 2 sizes bigger than the top of my cupcake, so it's going to depend on the size cupcake that you're baking with. You're also going to need a smaller circle cutter, and this one has to fit about 2 sizes inside the circumference of your cupcake. I've also got a little love heart cutter, and don't go too big on the shapes you want to put on top because you don't want them to be too heavy. I've got a cupcake to frost, some fondant or modelling chocolate, and I'm using pink and red today, some corn flour in a shaker, a little bit of our perfectly pineapple buttercream frosting in vanilla, and I will link to that and our red velvet cupcake recipe in the description box below. I've got a little bit of tap water, some little sprinkles. I'm just using some little silver nonpareils today, a fondant rolling pin. I've got some uncooked spaghetti noodles. So these are not cooked, these are quite firm. And spaghetti noodles, some people like to use wire, but I prefer everything in my cupcakes to be edible. Spaghetti noodles don't taste like anything when they're uncooked. They're not going to be overly pleasant to eat. They are just a crunchy spaghetti noodle. They don't taste like a cupcake or anything, but they're not going to injure anybody if they do happen to eat them at your party. I've also got a paintbrush, a knife, and a sharp knife with a really nice little pointed sharp tip on the end of it. So we're going to start off with putting some of those little hearts onto our spaghetti noodles. With this one, you just want to roll out a little bit of fondant, but you don't want it to be too thin and you don't want it to be too thick. You need your spaghetti noodle to be able to sit in it without tearing through the sides, but if it's too thick, it's going to be too heavy. So it's a fine balance. You can see there roughly how thick mine is. I'm just going to wipe off any of that excess corn flour on the back so it's nice and clean, and then we're just going to cut out one of our little love heart shapes. I'm just going to do one today, but you get the general idea. I've used 4 for each cupcake. Now I'm going to recommend you do these about 6 to 12 hours in advance because they do need some time to dry and you do want them to dry flat. You want to take your spaghetti noodle and just dip it in some of that plain tap water just to moisten it. And then I'm going to support the fondant with my finger and I'm going to push the spaghetti noodle in while everything's still on the bench, and I'm twisting that spaghetti noodle as I push it in so that it goes in easier, and the fingers supporting it are actually stopping it from tearing through or from stretching your shape out too much. There you've got one of your little wired or noodled hearts ready to go. Alright, so now you want to roll out some of that red fondant, and we're going to do this really nice and thin. So a bit more corn flour down and roll it out really nice and thin because we're doing a couple of layers of fondant and you don't want it to be too sweet. You want to cut one of your larger circles and pop it off to the side, and you want this top side, the nice clean side, to be the top of your cupcake. So flip it over so the corn flour side is facing up towards you, and then you want to just cut out another smaller circle, and that can just go corn flour side down on the bench. Do the same with your pink fondant, so roll it out really, really nice and thin, and then you want to take your larger circle cutter once again and just cut another, just a large circle. You don't need the small one. Now we want to stick these 2 pieces together, the 2 large pieces, so take your paintbrush and just a little bit of water, not too much, but you do want to give your red piece quite a nice coating on that corn-floured side. Once you're happy that you've got water all around it, pop that little pink piece on top and just smooth it down. You want this to be really, really nice and neat, so I just take my fondant roller and just roll over it really lightly once or twice to join them up really nicely. And then you want to take your circle cutter again and you're just going to recut that circle shape, which is going to give you really nice, beautiful, neat edges on all of your cupcakes. Perfect. It should be looking something like this: pink on one side, red on the other side. Now using the back of your butter knife, you just want to scoop some of that buttercream frosting, quite a generous amount, on top of your cupcake, and then you just want to push it down into the sides of your cupcake case, but try not to go over the edges because you don't want to make a mess. Use the back of your knife to smooth it back and forward and neaten it off so you've got a nice round dome, and then just use your finger and just go around the edges to make sure you've got rid of any of that excess buttercream that's hanging over. You want to take your little red circle now and just plop it straight on the middle on that nice fresh buttercream. And I'm going to have pink as my explosion and red as my main colour, so I want my 2 red pieces touching. Rest that fondant over the top, and then I just want to support it with my middle finger while pushing out with my index finger. So I'm not really squeezing the frosting out, I'm just kind of using it as a bit of a support, and then I'm going to use my palm to really smooth it off and my fingers just to edge that cupcake in. If you haven't done a smooth fondant dome before, I will link to our smooth fondant dome tutorial in the description box below, and that's going to help you out if you're having any trouble at all getting your beautiful smooth fondant dome on this cupcake. Now under that smooth fondant dome, you'll be able to see just a very faint outline of where that smaller circle is. Keep your eye on that because we're going to take our sharp pointy knife now and you want to cut across sort of from edge to edge of the smaller circle without going too far outside it. So I'm just cutting one line and you want to cut through essentially those first 2 layers of fondant without really going through that bottom layer. If you do, it doesn't matter, but do just try to feel where you're cutting, and you'll notice that I do a couple of smaller, shallower cuts rather than one big, long, deep cut because I can actually feel the fondant moving as I cut. Take the tip of your knife now and you just want to kind of peel out those little layers, and as you peel them out, you're using your fingers just to neaten off any rough edges. If you expose any of that buttercream under that smaller circle, make sure that you push them back in so you can't see any of that white frosting coming out, and you just want to fan all of those out while neatening them off with your fingers. A little bit of water now into that center section, and you'll see why shortly, but you do want that to be a little bit sticky. And then you want to take 4 of your little noodled love hearts and we're just going to stick them in. So I want mine to be at all different heights, and the noodles are great because you don't need wire cutters, you just break off the bottom. So I like the back one to be my longest, and then my side ones I break the noodle off a little bit shorter so that they're kind of just a little shorter than that long one. The one that I'm going to put at the front is the shortest of them all. It means that you can see all of those love hearts and none of them are hidden behind the one in front. You want to take your silver sprinkles now, and this is the reason that we made our fondant disc a little bit wet. It's so that these sprinkles will stick to it. You just want to sprinkle them in and make sure that you're only getting one layer. You don't want to go too crazy on these sprinkles or it's going to be a lot for your guests. The water's going to mean that they're going to stick in place, and when your guest bites into them, they're not going to go rolling off the cupcake and go flying anywhere. Smooth them off, and there you've got your stunning exploding hearts cupcake. I absolutely love this technique. It's so versatile and it's such a wow factor cupcake. If you guys have loved this tutorial, make sure that you check out My Cupcake Addiction for lots more in the way of cupcakes and cake pops. And as always, thanks so much for tuning in.